Okay, so this is the Stronghold. Oh gosh, the Stronghold. This is the Designer Market Update for Monday, January 27th, 2025. It's very easy for me to think about Stronghold digital mining on days like today because we are going to be talking somewhat at length about the future of Panther Creek and Scrubgrass and more broadly Sharon, Pennsylvania, in light of what has transpired in the market today. So clearly the market, if you've been keeping track, has crashed. Bitcoin mining stocks across the board were largely decimated, some worse than others. Bitfarms at last check was down well over 10%. So the cause for all of this carnage is ostensibly the news that a Chinese-based startup named DeepSeek was able to produce a large language model to rival OpenAI's O1 model, and they were able to do so for a fraction of the cost without using as many NVIDIA GPUs. And so that has caused NVIDIA, their stock was well off by 15+%. NASDAQ as a whole was down something like 3%. And as I alluded to, the Bitcoin mining sector was just decimated. The price of Bitcoin itself has held up reasonably well, about $101,000 last check per coin. Hash prices have diminished about $59. And the network hash rate was around 779. But the real story here is DeepSeek and whether or not one of two things will happen, right? Will we need as many chips from NVIDIA to power the AI revolution here in the United States? And secondarily, and arguably most importantly as it relates to Bitfarms, will we need as much energy to do so, right? So there's a silver lining to all of this from my perspective. So hear me out. Okay, so in the case of Bitfarms, Bitfarms has largely staked its acquisition of Stronghold Digital Mining, which I erroneously almost alluded to at the very beginning of today's broadcast, right? It staked its acquisition of Stronghold based on its energy assets and the land that's available for the development, arguably, of not just Bitcoin mining infrastructure, but also HPC AI hosting infrastructure. It's a big deal if it turns out that you no longer need as much energy to produce incredibly advanced large language models, because what that kind of means, right, is that you may not necessarily have the partnerships and the pricing that one would have maybe assumed a day ago you would have had as it relates to Sharon, Pennsylvania, Scrubgrass, and Panther Creek. Those are the three sites in Pennsylvania that Bitfarms owns, two of which, Scrubgrass and Panther Creek, are part of the Stronghold acquisition. Sharon, that's its own site. Now, the silver lining, might as well just share it with you now, is that DeepSeek appears to have done what it did by optimizing its source code as it relates to how it created the large language model and potentially optimizing the way the hardware itself was configured. Kind of keeping it simple for the purposes of this relatively short broadcast today. They did not have access to GPU chips, or at least certainly not as many of them, in part because the United States federal government had been imposing a ban on the export of these chips to, I guess, China. So they had, meaning DeepSeek, had to do more with less, and they figured it out. Now, the silver lining here is, well, what if OpenAI were to simply figure out how to implement these optimizations to the source code, right? The program that makes the large language model get put together and work. What if they can incorporate those optimizations, plus also attempt to implement the optimizations related to how the hardware is configured, and then you just add in all of the chips that they've already got? Does that put us on a path towards potential AGI, right? Artificial General Intelligence. Does that mean a quantum leap above and beyond the O1 model, which is OpenAI's current, arguably sort of like standard bearer model, right? Which DeepSeek matched, it seems, based on what we're learning with, as I said, about a fraction of the computational power and a fraction of the just energy usage. So what if OpenAI adopts a lot of the optimizations and just adds all those chips back into the mix? Do you see an even bigger spike in the potency of the model? Now, you could say to yourself, hey man, you're talking a lot about HPC AI. What does this have to do with Bitcoin mining, which arguably is what Bitfarms and a lot of other companies in the publicly traded Bitcoin mining ecosystem primarily do? And the answer is not much, right? Except for the fact that the markets seem to like to sell everything that remotely involves technology. If just one company, in this case NVIDIA, is going to get sold off because, hey, they may take a hit to their bottom line if they don't sell as many of their chips. So yes, Bitfarms and many other companies in the Bitcoin space, I think were collateral damage today. Okay, I don't think this directly, is a hit on these companies, except for the fact that certainly in the case of Bitfarms, a big part of their growth strategy, one can argue, is to develop these energy assets here in Pennsylvania that can, yes, power Bitcoin mining, but can also power HPC AI applications. And to partner with companies like, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Metas, the fill in the blanks, right? Like there's a lot of companies out there that are jockeying for and hustling for that energy. And so, yes, it does create a little bit of ambiguity as to whether or not as much energy is going to be needed if you don't need as much energy to create some of these advanced large language models. But as I said, the silver lining in this could very well be that if you implement a lot of the optimizations that DeepSeek was able to implement, but then you also add in all the chips you could ever dream of having, all the energy you could ever dream of having, do you then have a large language model that really becomes more of like an AGI type system? To the extent less power is needed and perhaps the industry begins to shift a little bit, and we hear more talk of, we don't maybe need sprawling data centers. We need something that's a little bit more compact, something more boutique, something more customized. I think that benefits Bitfarms as well. Panther Creek is a relatively compact site. Scrubgrass is a relatively compact site. Sharon, Pennsylvania, same thing. Could Bitfarms, at this very early stage where they haven't committed hundreds of millions to develop these sites yet, right? Can they potentially, right, create a more customized approach that would fit into the needs, albeit reduced needs, of some of these potential partners, and do so in a way that's a huge win for Bitfarms, a huge win for these partners, and really just a huge win for humankind in the sense that we get more and more advanced systems. So either way, I see Bitfarms as having the potential to really do well, either way. But in the interim, the stock's down, over 13, 14% today. I don't know if we're going to see a bounce back right away. Of course, we always hope that there will be a quick bounce back. But we might be in for a little bit of a period here where we just have to see, as they'd say, how the proverbial dust settles. So let's see what happens tomorrow. Bitcoin's still above $100,000 a coin. From my perspective, that's constructive. This has nothing fundamentally to do with Bitcoin. If this were about NVIDIA, that's different. This fundamentally does not, from my perspective, really have a lot to do with Bitcoin miners. But today, in the stock market at least, we were collateral damage, and Bitfarms, as it relates to its energy assets, it definitely is a factor that needs to be considered, as these HPC AI plans unfold for Bitfarms specifically. Okay, my friend, let's try to stay positive, albeit on a tough day. Let's be great, and we'll see each other again tomorrow.